Oh, the Valyard's charges. I always thought Valyard meant learned court prosecutor. Your points of law are spurious, your evidence weak, verging on irrelevant, and your reasoning quite unsound. In fact, your point of view belongs in quite another place. Perhaps the mantle of Valyard was a mistake. I would therefore suggest that you change it for the garment of quite another sort of yard. That of the knacker's yard! I'm Chris Spivey.
And I'm Eddie Webb.
And today on Genreless, we're here to talk about yet another episode of fucking Colin Baker's TV run. I hate this. I told Eddie before we started, I hate this. I even said that maybe we just totally skip this episode completely. And we moved directly into the McCoy era. Like, what we could have done is we start with a little bit of Colin Baker, and then suddenly we fall down and regenerate into the seventh Doctor.
So we start this episode wearing the wig of Colin Baker, and then I hit my head, and suddenly we're talking about Time in the Ronnie. Is what you're saying?
Yes. Although Time in the Ronnie is not a great episode, it is still better than this. And this is by the esteemed Robert Holmes. All right. That's more joke. This is actually a thoroughly near standard watchable Doctor Who episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We talked about how JNT had the great instinct of we need to get new writers for Doctor Who, and yet every watchable episode of this run has been inevitably Robert Holmes coming in and saving the show.
Yeah. Since you mentioned it, I guess we'll start there for this. Initially, Doctor Who was going to be canceled by Michael Grade. Michael Grade became, I want to say, like the BBC controller at the time in '84, like a year or so before Colin took over the role. Didn't like Doctor Who, and because he said it looked like, summarizing, looks like trash compared to what those Americans are doing with their big budget TV shows. And he wasn't completely wrong. It looked like trash, but the quality of the show originally came from the writing and the ingenuity that it brought forward. Ingenuity, in my opinion, is missing from the Colin Baker era. But you're saying, Eddie.
Well, I mean, also Michael Grade's argument is a bit suspect too, because his argument was this show looks like crap, therefore we need to cut its budget. And then go back and go, oh, look, the show looks even worse now. Well, of course it does, because you literally gave them half the money they had before to make the show.
I know. And not only that, they said that your show was too violent and everything else, but they were also the people that approved the scripts ahead of time. So It is an argument based on a sinking foundation of lies. Because another part of it is, some of it, there's rumor that it could be also that Michael Grade at the time had a personal vendetta against Colin Baker because he was seeing Colin Baker's ex-wife, Liz Goddard, at the time.
That's right.
There is an array of backstage drama that I know snippets of that I would love to see. That would be more entertaining, once again, than the actual show itself.
Right. And I mean, before getting to the season proper, there was the cancellation that happened before this kind of caught everyone by surprise. So they had an entire set of scripts commissions they were looking at before they were told, yeah, you're not going to make any more. So it was a bit of a surprise to the show, but it also kind of shouldn't have been. Like, it's like, this is kind of the weird catch-22, right? It's like, when you look at all the backstage information, you can't really... it's like all the points are true, but a lot of these problems are things that the BBC created for itself. The BBC put someone in the job that didn't want the job. The BBC cut budget and then said it looks like crap. The BBC wouldn't let them hire certain people, and then the script quality tanks. So a lot of it is the BBC creating its own cycle of decline and then using it to try to justify Kate's like the show. But at the same time, it's also kind of hard to watch this era because it is genuinely not very good television.
And they also put it against Coronation Street and things like that, which is them wanting to kill a show, but there was enough fan outcrying with the the phenomenal Doctor in Distress music video that came out once they had canceled it to a soft cancel of, whoa, it's just on a pause for 18 months to let it breathe.
Right.
And so Colin Baker, Nicole Bryant, everyone fought to have the show to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually agreed, and that's where they like the thing about coming out for 18 months and they'll put it back on the air. And the thing is, you can't cancel a show because they say the show itself is still making money from how much it costs to make. So the arguments there also fall apart. And it's that they just didn't like this one specific show, and they wanted to create other things instead.
Right. And so the BBC is weird. Something that I'm always kind of new, but I'm continuing to wrap my head around as I live here, is that it is a government institution in a way that I am not familiar with from the U.S. So while this mandate has shifted over the near century it's been around, it was created initially to kind of entertain and inform. And to there was initially a very strong thing of like it had to contribute to the country's moral fiber on some level, which is always a concerning phrase. So that's why when Doctor Who started, we talked about this a little bit back in the first Doctor's era, that there was an educational mandate for the show that fell away as soon as the Daleks became commercially popular. And so the extremely reductive way to look at the BBC is that whether the Tories or the Labour is in charge. Because when the Tories are in charge, generally it needs to kind of make money. It needs to be run like a commercial television station. When Labour's in charge, it needs to be more educational. And Doctor Who always kind of falls into that middle zone, because if it's making too much money, then it's crassly commercial and not contributing to education and a good moral fiber. It's too violent, whatever, blah, blah. And then if it softens its subject matter in order to appease that, then it becomes less popular and makes less money. So at this era, it's kind of fighting both. Modern BBC is very different in that regard. It still has some lingering elements of that original structure. But now Doctor Who is more explicitly and extantly a commercial success, and so there's less contribution, and also arguably people's acceptance of the matter have changed to the point where Doctor Who now fills that more adequately. Arguably, the level of violence in modern Doctor Who is on par with what we're seeing through a lot of the Colin Baker era. But now it's going to be more acceptable because that's just how television is made now.
So it's also effectively 40 years later. So
right,
it has evolved since then. Which you could go back to say that then Doctor Who was being ahead of its time, if you wanted to kind of a generous interpretation of it.
And that's honestly I'm trying to take a very charitable view of this, because I mean it would be very easy for us and kind of a little bit boring to be like, this is why this sucks, this is why it sucks. So I'm trying to take a positive spin of this, and some of this is Doctor Who kind of exceeding its grasp, right? Like Doctor Who's always done well, I think, when it has constraints and it tries to punch above its weight. The problem is there's too many constraints happening here, and it's still trying to find a path forward. Like Doctor Who's one of the first major British television exports. It found commercial success outside of the UK in a way that very few shows had done prior. And that doesn't say that it never happens, but also happens very explicit, kind of weird corners. Doctor Who consistently, when it put video cassettes out, would sell, and they would sell in other countries besides the UK very consistently. Like you said, it kept making money. The money it was making, however, was not from the UK, and that was kind of the problem. Was it's a British television show, needs to follow British guidelines and standards. It doesn't matter what overseas people want, but the overseas people are the reason why the show is making money. So that's kind of the catch-22 that's happening here. And Michael Gray's kind of trying to get one of those factors to change so he can justifiably cancel it, and it's not quite happening. And that's the problem that we're running into right here.
In addition to all of that all of that office room drama going on, they didn't like JNT, which you'll find out because once the show got a 24th season, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. One of the
Yeah.
things they told him to do to have the next season of Doctor Who, we're going to like lower your budget. You're going to be on this slot in this time, but we also need you to tell Colin to go fuck off.
Right.
And that was a sign of JNT. And some people think that was a move to see if JNT would then step down instead of going and backstabbing a person that he himself handpicked and wrote the role for and put into this role to do.
And this is again kind of a weird thing. Like we've said before, JNT is deeply controversial and highly problematic. But one thing is that he was loyal. He didn't want to be in this job at this point. He actually wanted to step away and was told he couldn't because, to be blunt, the BBC did not have any room for a gay man as a producer anywhere else in their slate. So they gave him what they perceived as the shit job. You could keep running Doctor Who. But JNT was the kind of person like, okay, well, if this is the job I have, I'm still going to do the best because my role is to defend and protect this show and do the best I can for this show. So he had I don't want to use the word ethics, that's the wrong word. He had a duty, he felt, a self-imposed duty to make sure that the show did the best it could. So he vigorously and viciously defended the show to the best of his ability in a horrible environment. And so it's in a way almost tragic because he doesn't want this job, and yet he's so it's we have no place else for you to go, but also we're going to lambaste you for doing a bad job on Doctor Who. What he had to have seen that basically this is the BBC going, we don't want you anywhere, we want you out, but we can't legally do that.
Mm-hmm. And coupled with having to deal with that from higher ups, he was also then in multiple heated fights with Eric,
Right,
as the script editor, who wanted their own idea and the very different version of Doctor Who, which ran counter to what he was being told by the executives, counter, I think, to what Colin and Nicola wanted, but Eric was pushing for. And so it was a lot of additional drama till eventually Eric Sayer quits for the last episode of this run. And this is all right. So let me take a step back. They commissioned Robert Holmes to write this one and one other that was going to be the concluding piece of it out of the 4 parts. And they had different writers for the middle pieces. And Robert Holmes wrote the Mysterious Planet script that was almost called Wasteland or Robots of Ravalox. I kind of like Robots of Ravalox.
I do kind of like
so
that. Yeah.
Reminds you of like Robots of Death.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of another Tom Baker reach back, which
Yeah.
I may make a comment about when we get started. They got a bunch of notes just like eradicating that script about why it was so bad. And they made some minor tweaks, and Holmes himself was a little bit distraught by the feedback. Eric was less than amused by that because he really looked up to Holmes as Holmes is an amazing writer. Because I think we talked about it before we started airing. Robert Holmes, at worst, makes watchable TV.
Yeah.
At best, makes something phenomenal. And so that is an amazing track record. Like, that's an amazing track to be on.
Yeah.
And the feedback they got, in my opinion, doesn't come from the quality of the script. It comes from the fact they're still trying to axe the show throughout this entire time. And Holmes is also supposed to write the final one, like the big reveal episode. And Holmes started writing, but unfortunately passed away because he was ill, making that his last contribution to Doctor Who. Eric took over, wrote a script. JNT saw it, had feedback, and wanted to change the ending. Eric didn't like it, so he quit and said they couldn't use the script. So that's when they called in the Bakers, Pip and Jean, I think are their names, to come in and write the script. They had no access to Eric Sayer's script because it was legally can't do it. And they had 72 hours, I think, to write the finale of a 4-part serial. That was one story.
Well, A 4-part serial, and B, the entire season, technically. Because they also had the right to knock the entire Trial of Time Lord storyline.
Yeah. So.
And also, I think
I
also
say
they did not
serial where I'm considering each of these like one part of a thing instead of.
Sorry. Right. I thought you meant the actual 4-part story. Yeah, and on top of that, I think they did not even have access to Robert Holmes's.
They didn't
plot breakdown either. So.
And I did think they had JNT in a room going, at best.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that is,
So
regardless of what you think of the ending, that is fucking phenomenal.
yeah, and I mean, and this is what's almost frustrating about Trial of a Time Lord, because you have 18 months to reboot your show, which, while on the one hand is extremely frustrating, on the other hand is an unprecedented amount of time. It's like, okay, we have a year and a half to make this the best season of television we could possibly make. And just everything seems to go wrong during the season. And some of it is because of the creative team, some of it's not. But we're left with, again, if you don't know the back stuff, what we're left with is the show goes off the air for 18 months, it comes back, this big, huge reveal, and you go, really, that's the best you can do? And so even some of the more ardent supporters of Doctor Who are starting to look at this and go, well, maybe there's a point here, you know? And it's just the, wow, Colin was done wrong. I could, on some level, see why the radical measures were made. But again, that's all with the caveat of, between the BBC and JNT, nobody here is doing their best.
And Eric, you can't forget
Yeah. Oh
Eric
yeah. Sorry.
as
Yeah.
the script editor.
Eric,
He has like control of those scripts that are coming in, that are the
right.
stories the actors have to then try to elevate.
Right. Now, and again, and it's kind of a weird place, because like, as a Doctor Who fan, obviously I'm like, yeah, I really wish we could have had a better season. I wish, it'd be nice to have one season that had a really strong Colin Baker run. Mm, And it's an easy kind of go, yeah, well, fuck Eric Sayward and fuck Mike Reed and all that. But like, well, okay, maybe still fuck Mike Reed or Grade. But as a professional creative, having someone go, okay, listen, no, I hired a guy, I'm trying to protect him, and you're giving me shit, and the only leverage I have is to take my work and walk away with it and deny you it. That's a very valid tactic that I support. And the company decided, rather than negotiate, they brought in other people to finish that work, which again is their right to do. But I'm like, I'm not, as much stick as I give Eric Sayward, I can't disagree with his walking away from it in the same way I can't disagree with Colin refusing to film a regeneration scene.
I can disagree with Sayward more than I can Baker,
Mhm.
because Sayward is someone that was, we'll say, equivalent middle management,
Right.
and you have a better insight into everything that's going on around you. You may not
Mhm.
like GNT, but if like this is a direction you have to go to save the show that you're working, you have to compromise part of your vision to have this thing work. And I'm getting a very strong sense that Eric Sayer didn't want to compromise at all,
Oh, okay. That
continuously and
I didn't know that
repeatedly
part.
throughout the process. Like, I don't know, my vision or my vision alone doesn't work. It never works. And
Okay.
part of me as a writer understands saying, you know what, fuck you. But if this has been your role for multiple years, it's not just about you anymore. It's about like all those people that come, their jobs, that are working here doing these things.
Right.
And
And I mean, then I will say, at least, that we're looking at an era where everyone involved is a very flawed individual,
yes,
making some very bad decisions at a time when the show really needs someone to step up and just firmly take it in a new direction, which will happen with the next script editor. Andrew Cartmel does exactly that,
you almost need
but we're
someone
not there
with
yet.
a vision, someone that'll bring in new scrappy energy and a bunch of new writers to try something,
Right.
to add legacy, to
But I mean,
almost add an other.
but that's kind of the weird thing of, like, that's what JNT tried to do. He just did it badly. And so we brought in the old guard, and they hadn't updated, allegedly hadn't updated their material enough. I disagree. I feel like Robert Holmes did a good job here. So the answer was to bring in new energy. It's just that the Bakers are not the answer, right? And they were hired because they were old hands who could write fast. I mean, that's straight up the reason why they were hired. And you can't argue with that in the situation you're in, but they wrote Time in the Ronnie, and that's the thing that exists.
Ugh. Part of it for me is I think that JNT was listening too much to the fans when
Yes.
he was going to conventions, and that constantly made him shift his vision around. And I go before saying that there has to be a measure of compromise for your vision, but you can't be wishy-washy. Like, you have to understand that what the essence of what your story is and what you're trying to do, and you keep that, and you can change the parts around it. Like, if your arc was to have the Doctor be an absolute asshole and eventually warm, you have to understand that you're going to take a ratings hit. I'm not even in TV, and I know that you'll take a ratings hit for that time until people get used to the new Doctor. And so you have to back that, and then you reinforce it with good scripts. So you can have this one erratic piece, but everything else around them is good until they turn around and be good. Then you can get some shitty scripts in there. How Eric said it. I'm done insulting the scripts there. I'm done, because I don't understand. I don't know how much trouble the writers had to do to go through it, or how many revisions they had, or what other pressures they were under.
Well, there is an interesting pressure that is not talked about that I've discovered recently, which is fascinating. And so it comes from JNT, because during 18 months, there was the what are we going to do for the new season? JNT sees a musical in the West End called Time, Dave Clark's Time the Musical. And I'm going to read to you the plot summary of Time the Musical, which was produced in 1986, which being around the time they would start production on this. Derived from 1970s musical The Time Lord by Solms and Daniels, it focuses on contemporary rock musician Chris Wilder, who has been transported with his backup singers and band from a concert to the high court of the universe in the Andromeda Galaxy. In light of mankind's stride in space exploration, the Time Lord Melstiak has decided that time has come to examine Earth's people from what role they will play in the quest for universal peace, and Wilder and his band are called upon to defend their planet. There is no evidence, very scant evidence of what was in this play. We can't find scripts. There are very few shots of the set. We don't know what was in this. There's a concept album that was released, but actually what was in the production, we don't know. But boy, howdy, it sounds like he just ripped off a musical for Trial of the Time Lord.
You could have at least changed Andromeda to something else. Like,
right? So I genuinely believe JNT went to a bunch of writers and said, oh, I saw this great musical, make this.
I wouldn't be surprised, because the actor who plays the Valyard, the actors and actress who plays the Valyard and the Inquisitor were hired because JNT met them at a restaurant. Like, as someone that's horrible at networking, I gotta say, I am moved by how networking must have worked. Colin got a job as a doctor because it was funny at a party. These people got a role because they were just at a restaurant with him. How do I learn to network like that, Eddie?
Be a mediocre white guy.
I can't do that. I'm an exceptional black man. I would never get
I know. You're too good. I'm sorry.
Which means I'll never be famous or make any money. All right. Good to know. Good pep talk. Good pep talk about the podcast.
So, I mean, yeah, this is the fact that we got something that is vaguely watchable is actually a bit of a triumph considering all of this going on.
Now,
but
this is the point.
Such an owned goal, right? It's like you made this situation.
And for me, I will say this is the best TV era Colin Baker between the two seasons is this season.
Yeah,
I love
season. Yeah,
I love the conceit of the trial. I love all the trappings and the ideas behind it, but the execution is a little dodgy. But I love the Valyard as a character.
Yeah, no,
I love utterly and completely.
There is a reason why every time the new era has made an allusion towards either some new Time Lord that's not the Master or some kind of weird dark version of the Doctor, the Valyard's name always comes up. He is a enticing concept, and he's very well played here. It's just that the plot straight up pulls a Lost, where it's like there's a really cool, intriguing storyline that goes absolutely fucking nowhere.
And for anyone that hasn't watched like the Trial of the Time Lord completely, The Valyard you discover around the third episode is the Doctor around his 12th or 13th generation, right towards the end. So like all the evil and everything else inside the Doctor regenerates into the Valyard. So we get
Right.
an evil version of the Doctor being just badass, destroying everything, owning the Master, owning like everyone else he comes around, which would be an exceptional thing to see. And I think last episode I mentioned that the concept was wasted by the new Doctor, by the new series of Doctor Who, and it is because they never used it. They kind of played and touched on it a little bit with like the Time Lord Victorious, maybe the Time Lord Victorious,
Right.
and they went,
Exactly.
no, we can't do that.
Right. And I mean, on one hand, I want a world where David Tennant plays a Valeyard. Oh my god, that would be so amazing.
It would have to be different than Kilgrave, though.
Right. And I think he could do it. But you're right. It's one of those things that like it's such a cool concept, and yet it only works. It only works this era because so this is something that's fascinating to me is I think we talked about during the third Doctor era that the Master is meant to be specifically a rival to John Pertwee's Doctor, not
Yeah, his Moriarty.
right. It was not meant to be the Doctor's Moriarty. It's meant to be the third Doctor's Moriarty. So on some level, I really feel like the Valeyard is kind of another stab at that direction. He's very much the sixth Doctor's Moriarty. Because he is just as eloquent, just as erudite, just as persnickety about points of order, just as obsessed with detail, and arguably, like we talked about before, not as good as his job as he thinks he is. There's a lot of parallels between the Valeyard and the Sixth Doctor specifically. And so, while it's an enticing concept, and as a fan would love to see a new version of the Valeyard, I also think that on some level it would be hard to not do outside of Colin Baker and the guy who plays the Valeyard here because they're very specifically those exact characters are in parallel to each other.
I agree. And that'd be pretty amazing. This it's the very least it's something I think Big Finish could pull off.
They did a one shot of Against the Valeyard, and then of course the Big Finish. Let's take any 10-second gap and make it into an entire box set. They did do an entire box set of what led up to the Sixth Doctor actually regenerating, and the Valeyard plays a big role in that.
And since we're about to transition the episode proper for a synopsis, one of the things that the actors did, Nicola and Colin, is that for the 18-month break in between, they decided that 18-month period was also how long their characters had been together. So that's why we get them acting softer and more sort of engaged with each other.
Yeah.
Which the dynamic between those two for the opening scene we're going to discuss, if it had been like that for the near entire run, I think the show would have been better.
I completely agree. It's sadly too short of a taste of what a good Perry Sixth Doctor dynamic could have looked like.
And even after the Twin Dilemma incident, if the next episode had started with them in a relationship like that, it would have sanded off some of the edges for Colin's Doctor, making him more tolerable until you get to equivalenting this version of him.
Right.
Because it would have shown her accepting him, even if her role had not changed, which she was underutilized and is little more than a MacGuffin for most of the plots.
Right. Yeah. It's there is an interesting not very quite even a fan theory, but go back to Big Finish for a second. Big Finish, like I said, will make anything into content. They've done audio drama versions of the not produced series, and so if you actually stop watching at the end of season 23, I think it is, or no, 22, Trial of Time Lord. Listen to those audios and then watch Trial of Time Lord. There is actually a proper arc for Doctor and Perry, which is quite satisfying. It's thin, it's not massive, but it is there, and it does involve Syl coming back. So you got that to look forward to.
You and the Syl obsession.
But it also has the Doctor and Perry meeting a giant space whale. So I mean, it's not. There's some good shit in there.
Did they bring back the celestial toy maker in the audio
They
adventures?
did, so there's that. He's in control of video games, and very specifically 80s era arcade video games, which is, to its credit, Big Finish very much kept what popular culture viewpoints of how video games work intact. So it is complete rubbish from a modern perspective, but it's about what you expect older guys who don't know how video games actually work think video games work. So it's very authentic, sometimes to its detriment. But yes, the toy maker comes back and controls video games that control people because that's how these things work.
I'm
It's not
willing
all
to
great.
bet you they didn't make one of those scripts. Do you know the one I'm thinking that I'm sure they didn't make?
Which one?
How to Cure Yellow Fever.
Yeah, I have some
I
bad
bet
news
they
for you.
didn't make that. What's that?
I have some bad news for you.
They did not make that.
They did.
Did it occur in Shanghai how it was supposed to?
It. Hang on, I
Because
got.
I would be scared to have a bunch of white British men write that, Eddie.
Because there was a So it's Yellow Fever and How to Cure It. I'm looking it up because it's been a minute since I've listened to it. It was a unscripted Fourth Doctor serial, actually.
I think it was supposed to be in season 23.
Oh no, you're right.
The
You're right.
alternative season 23 that didn't happen.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. It was done for that. So, but Big Finish didn't do it that way, I don't think. You can tell we don't want to talk about this episode.
I think it is more fun us talking about the Sixth Doctor just in general.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah, I guess it was done.
I'm pretty sure they didn't make that.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different episode then. I may be thinking of a
You gotta
different
be.
Lost serial. It's entirely possible. So I may be wrong on this front. Because I'm looking around, and usually the Doctor Who wiki is kind of says, "Oh yeah, and this was redone by Big Finish." Okay, it wasn't.
Because
Was it a novelization?
from what I know, I'm willing to bet that if they tried to make it, it would make the Talons of Wang Cheyenne look PC.
Right. Since we're here, real quick, the story was to take place in Singapore and featured the return of the Autons, suggested appearances by the Tremas Master, the First Ronnie, and the Brigadier on Holiday. The story is written later than the rest of the season, so the script was only in proposal form at the time of its cancellation. The basic outline of the story was to see the Master and Ronnie operating under the guise of a traveling street theater involved in a plot with the Autons. The story would open with Perry seeing the Statue of Liberty on the scanner screen, and she would think she was back in America, only to find it was a massive cultural garden with many miniature landmarks on display. So no. Okay, yeah. I must be thinking of a different show then, because they did not actually do that one, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, where I'm kind of going with all of this is we're kind of talking about this because, frankly, there's not much to talk about. We will talk about it, but the reality is that this season shows you the potential of what could have been, and I think that has obsessed people ever since. You know, it's like, what does a good Sixth Doctor season look like? And so I think Big Finish, the novels, the comic strips, everyone else has tried to create what they believe to be a good Sixth Doctor run. And as a result, they're all very different because they're all taking different slices of the Sixth Doctor. But this story by Robert Holmes shows you that it could have been done. There's nothing inherently wrong with the structure. It is just how it was written and how it was produced. And so I think that has obsessed people for decades ever since, which is why we're talking about this stuff, because you want that to be there. You want that to exist, and it just didn't.
Nope. One more quick point before we move on is I asked, I think an episode or two ago doing Doctor Who, how old the Doctor was. And in this one, we have him state he's 900 years old.
Right.
But in Revelation of the Daleks that happened before this and happened before the break, in like the 2-year period that the actors said were going to be there, he stated again he was 900 years old.
Right.
And I think in an episode or something after this with Mel, he'll also state he's 900 years old.
Right.
I feel that the show doesn't want, for some reason, they're afraid of the Doctor saying, "Oh, I'm like 3,000 years old or 2,000 years old." I'm picking up on that hesitancy that's right here, because when we even hit Tennant's doctor, he says he's 900 years old.
Right. Yeah, it has become kind of a meme. I have always interpreted it like a middle-aged men or women who will say, I'm 39 when they're clearly not, right? It's the, I don't want to admit that I am older than arbitrary date. So, like, I don't want to admit that I am 4 digits of age. So I really think that just the doctor in their midlife crisis. Like, oh no, I'm 900. It's like, no, you're
Now,
clearly several thousand years old. No, 900.
and admittedly, now we do know that during Peter Capaldi's era, he became well over 1 million years old.
Right.
Because he had to break through the wall with his fist. All right.
Right.
To the synopsis of this episode. I like the ending of that episode. But maybe one day we'll get there, and that might be an episode Eddie picks, because I wouldn't pick that episode. I'd only pick the ones that I thought were good out of the Capaldi run, so maybe that's 3. The special effects ever on Doctor Who are seeing the opening title sequence for this. We get the massive spaceship pulling in the TARDIS. It is beautiful. I think it is the most expensive piece of Doctor Who ever filmed, if you take into account the year that it was made. I think it cost over £8,000.
That's quite good.
That shot.
Because that was a model shot, so they had to build that model.
I think it was 6 feet is like how big it was.
Wow.
So incredible. And JNT justified it as like he wanted to like draw in audiences, because this might be people's first time seeing it, or people coming back after 18 months and want to like grab their attention. And I specifically pause here because I want to take a moment. I think that he did it because of the feedback he got from Michael Grade about the quality and production of the show, to show that we could do that if we had a budget, to show them what it would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And it was beautiful. I think the money could have been spent better in other places. So. The TARDIS materializes in a corridor, and the 6th Doctor emerges, bewildered and alone. He walks into a room and quips with a man dressed in black. Then other Gallifreyans arrive, staring at him as they begin an inquiry for his conduct unbecoming of a Time Lord and transgressing the first law of time. The Inquisitor notes that the Doctor has been on trial previously for similar charges. The Valeyard states that the Doctor was shown too much leniency on that occasion. The Doctor calls the entire trial a farce, tries to play the president card, and is quickly told that he was deposed for neglecting his duties. He then refuses a court defender and would rather speak for himself. The Valeyard plans to show 2 separate incidences. The first opens a case by using the Matrix to show the Doctor's action on the planet Ravalox. Lox.
I just, although I have been hot and cold on the use of continuity in JNT era, I love this use of continuity, because they're like, is the Doctor going, oh, by the way, I've been the president for like several years now, several seasons, and them going, yeah, but you haven't actually done your job, so we got rid of you. It's like a nice moment of, here's continuity, and here's why it doesn't matter. Let's move on. Thank you. That is what continuity should be used for. It should be used for minor little notes and gags like that. It's like, you were deposed, and I'm just going, looking hurt, like, oh, I was? You hated the job. You didn't want it, and now you're mad you don't have it. That was great. I love that moment.
In a way, though, it also feels like it's a callback to Colin's first appearance on Doctor Who, because I remember right, it was in the Arc of Infinity when he becomes a president.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And that's when Colin was a captain of the guard and shot
Right.
And we get the most badass scene ever of Nyssa drawing a staser on the president of Gallifrey to defend the Doctor. Like, that is a companion you want, who is ride or die.
Draw down, man. Love it.
I love the opening scene because it sets the entire stage for everything we're going to do. And it shows you the snippets that's going to be scattered throughout the rest of the season. It's a good place for it. And it also gives us a Valeyard, who you know is a villain because it's easy TV coding. Right. He's dressed in black. He's quippy and arrogant. Right.
And he has a distinct sneer in his voice. It's like, okay, you're not subtle. We get what's going on here. But it is interesting that the Inquisitor, which is not a word that we have positive connotations to, is actually the supposedly neutral party in this.
But, Eddie, they're sporting the high collars, so we know that it's going to be a fair trial. All Gallifreyans with high collars are fair and just. It's not like they
Yes,
banish a doctor, force regeneration, or anything. High collars win the day.
they certainly would not drag him out of the War Master's shenanigans and put him on trial for 5 seconds and banish two of his human companions with no memories whatsoever, just to force him to have a different face and then banish him to Earth in the 1970s or maybe the 1980s for no reason. No,
Any other comments about the opening bit? I wanted
no, that's fine.
to get that up. All right. The Doctor and Perry arrive on Ravelux, which is virtually identical to Earth. He tells Perry that the official records state that the planet was devastated by a solar fireball, but the forests they're walking through suggest otherwise. Sablon, Glitz, and Dibber
Woo!
banter as they prepare to sniper the Doctor, who managed to wander off just in time, and both express their upsetness at not being able to kill him. Perry expresses a feeling of deja vu as they wander around and wants to leave before the duo discover a cave entrance. The Doctor and Perry enter the cavern. Glitz and his cohort discuss their plan to destroy the L3 robot by sabotaging its black light converter system, which locals have turned into a totem they worship. The criminals attempt to intimidate the locals, who they call primitives, with a loud bang, saying, "Take me to your leader." Perry discovers a sign in the cavern saying Marble Arch, a London Underground sign. This means that they're on Earth. Perry begins to mourn for her planet. The Doctor uh, interrupts and replies that it's not really relevant. We're time travelers. Whatever. He then asks why Perry is not with him at this. Sorry, I faux pod. I'm reading my notes and I made a error there that I need to fix myself that I won't do live on air. Instead, I'll talk about it for a minute and distract you that I made a mistake by making it sound funny. Back in the courtroom, the Valyard answers that Perry is where the Doctor left her, and the Doctor must have temporary amnesia as a side effect of being taken out of time. I'm pausing there.
Right. Quick note at the ends. I actually did kind of like the note of when you're taking out time, you have slight amnesia, because it actually plays into the joke I made about the Third Doctor, because that's exactly what happened to him last trial. So it's like there is neat interleavening of past references here, but again, in a good way as opposed to the annoying way that happened in previous seasons. It's like it uses to kind of build up the mythology of the show rather than make it seem like things you have to check off to understand what's going on.
Do you know why it's so well done?
Because Robert Holmes.
Yes, Robert Holmes.
Which you could tell is Robert Holmes because it involves two sleazy con men as characters.
We got to take a minute to talk about Glitz.
Oh,
He is
so
an
good.
incredible character, and he will come back again and again. So much so that I think reading some of the fan stuff, it looks like he is considered a companion. I can't consider him a companion because
Right.
he's not. He just shows up. He's
not.
sort of a sidekick at best.
No, but he is like the best part of this show. He's the best part of Dragonfire. Because he is a character that's kind of aware of the tropes being thrust upon him and rejects them to some degree, which is hilarious. Because he's like, I know my role in this is to be the stupid, evil space pirate, but I'm actually erudite and kind of annoyed at the role I have to play in this on some level. And it's great because Dibber is absolutely that role. Right? Dibber is like, no, I am the ruthless, lowbrow space pirate, and Sablon has aspirations to not only be better than that, but also kind of be better than this story. And he works, right? It's like, I don't want to be in this story. I want to be in a different story where I'm the lead. And it's like, yeah, I kind of want that too, actually.
It is incredible because Robert Holmes takes the concept that Eric Sayer had been trying to use, like a hard, we'll say hard man because it's always like a male they choose to do
Yeah.
this. A hard man that comes in and does all this stuff and is kicking butt in the show. And Holmes takes that conceit and makes it into something that actually works. Sayer had tried multiple iterations. We had
Yep.
Layden, who was fighting Cybermen and stuff, didn't work. We had the thespian from the one with the Great Fire of London, kind of worked, but not quite there. And a few other iterations, but this one works and sticks.
Yeah. And I think the reason why is because Robert Holmes has always been good about recognizing that Doctor Who is best when it's slightly silly. And Glitz is exactly that. He's slightly silly, and he's, again, self-aware of the kind of show he's in. It's not Deadpool breaking the fourth wall or anything, but it's the, I don't have to explain to you my role in the narrative. You see me, and Dibber's there to kind of fill in any gaps, but ultimately it's like, I am Space Pirate, so I can build from that immediately and start going into more interesting places while keeping that hard Space Pirate, ruthless mercenary vibe, because Eric Sayward constantly had to reinforce and reestablish he's hard, he's hard, he's hard. And it's like, no, let's just start from that point and go somewhere else. Robert Holmes has confidence the audience knows how these tropes work in a way that Eric Sayward was never entirely confident with.
Mm-hmm. And taking a step back to the Doctor and Perry specifically, this telling also fixes a problem I've had with some Fifth Doctor and most of Colin's run, is that it centers on the Doctor and Perry almost from the start. Mm-hmm. Even if we remove the original piece with the courtroom trial, it centers with the Doctor and Perry doing something together as a TARDIS team. Right. And it shows a Doctor taking a role that he'll take more predominantly in the 7th series with Ace as a mentor of sorts for Perry. Like, he understands that the planet can't be at this point, but he also knows that this is Perry's field. And he's waiting for Perry to make those connections that he's already made. But you have the point of reference. The Doctor has hundreds of years of experience. So, of course, he would reach some of these conclusions faster.
Right.
And then Perry puts in to add in that you already knew this. So you get that friendship right there.
Right. But it's the bickering now is very, very clearly lighthearted. These are friends who are comfortable in their bickering, not actually at each other's throats. And that was not at all clear in previous seasons.
And we get Perry wearing reasonable outfits now. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I gave some stick about J&T's original purpose, but I, as a young Chris, was swayed by Perry and J&T's planning. I won't lie, I was. And me, as an older Chris, I think that Perry should be able to dress how Perry, the actress, wants to. And that's why I leave that statement.
Right. It certainly is the height of mid-'80s fashion. With the hair and the shoulder pads, it's perfect.
What I couldn't tell that I was trying to see, because I was trying to see, do they have her in heels or is she not in heels? Because that would have been like the final determining factor. Because if you're heels in a forest, running through the forest, I would quibble with you. That's unreasonable. She should have pulled a Letty fucking Lewis and took off those shoes and like ran. I had to make my joke. I couldn't help myself.
One of the reasons why Ace is great, because Ace wears boots, and that's much more reasonable.
Ace, we're going to really get into like favorite companions at the end of this classic run. I hope you're ready for that.
Okay. I also like that we kind of get a retread of a story we didn't cover, Face of Evil, which is where the 4th Doctor meets Leela. But it's another version of, let's take advanced technology and reframe it as more mystical components. And again, because much like Face of Evil, which I'm not certain I think Robert Holmes also wrote, but the idea is that this allegedly primitive culture is not stupid. They just have different knowledge. And so I really love the fact that Glitz and Dibber are going to pull the classic, we'll pretend to be space gods and cow them, and they're just like, oh, it's you assholes again. And I just really dig that. It's like, oh, look, it's more people from the stars. Yes. Please take us away from this thing that we worship. Oh, by the way, there are the guns. Thanks so much. I mean, I just love the fact they're so like over it.
Face of Evil was written by Chris Boucher, script editor Robert Holmes.
There it is. Okay, I knew there was some component of Robert Holmes in there.
Once again, Robert Holmes, I think we've established, was a very bitter person, but was fucking exceptional. Like, I can't stress enough how good he was. And I would have loved to have seen J&T not have a mandate to get rid of all the original writers originally, and at least had Holmes throughout more of that Davison and Baker run than what we got. I think that could have also helped turn things around.
Yeah, I think in particular Davison would have worked really well against more Holmes scripts, just because, and we saw in Caves of Andromeda, or Androzani, sorry, because his bitterness balances really well with Davison's human doctor. So I think that would have been just some fantastic frisson that came from that. It still works really well, but it's mostly because Cullen is swallowing a lot of his bombast to make this script work.
And before we move on, I want to point out that we still get some of the Doctor's callousness when Perry constantly wants to leave because she has a bad feeling about what's going on.
Yeah.
And his like, no, like, I want to see what this is. My want is more important than yours. I understand we're friends now, but I need to know what this is.
Right. The big difference that's happening here, which again, why Robert Holmes is good, is that before I specifically said Vengeance on Varos, I was annoyed because the Doctor did that and was proven right. Robert Holmes recognizes the Doctor does that and needs to be proven wrong. So Perry was absolutely right to be worried to be here, and arguably the Doctor would not be on trial if he had listened to her. So he is objectively, if he had listened to his companion, he would not be in the problem he is now. So that is the way you handle this. You can have an arrogant doctor, you can have a doctor who's callous, but you need the companion to balance him. And this is, again, so frustrating because in this small snippet we're seeing a potentially really good season between these two characters.
Absolutely. As the Matrix resumes, showing the events on Ravlox, Perry is still distraught and the Doctor fails to comfort her and refuses to leave the mystery. The Doctor discovers a secret door and goes into the complex alone. Two masked figures appear and capture Perry. Meanwhile, Glitz and Dibber are brought before the Queen. Glitz claims that the totem attracted the fireball that devastated Ravlox and asks for it to be taken down. The Queen tells him that the other star travelers have come and asked for the totem to be dismantled, and they have yet to succeed. Glitz and his cohort draw their guns, but are quickly overpowered by the locals and locked up. The Doctor finds an underground complex and picks up a bottle of water out in the open, almost like it's a trap. This sets off an alarm, and people enter and subdue him. He is accused of stealing water and sentenced to be stoned. The Doctor tries to block the rocks with his umbrella, but is knocked unconscious. Back in the courtroom, the Valyard proposes that the inquiry into the Doctor's activity should become a full-blown trial, with the penalty being the termination of his life.
Credits.
Bum, bum, bum.
Again, like, him finding a bottle of water and just being jumped on is so stupid, but Robert Holmes does that intentionally. It's like, this makes no sense, and we recognize this, and his bitterness at this is actually just really, ends up being really great. Of like, of course, this society makes no sense, and that's actually the point of the script. Whereas in a lesser hand, like Eric Sayward's, it would have been like, let's make a dark thing about the conservation of resources. Like, no, it's such a ludicrous concept. Like, literally, one bottle of water is a huge problem. That's silly. Let's lean into that.
It's the fact that it's out in the middle of the floor, a big bottle, and this half a dozen dudes are standing behind the door waiting. Maybe someone's gonna grab it. Maybe to leap out. Like, that is.
I mean, you might as well have the bottle of water like under a box with a stick holding it up, right?
Oh God. As I've become the Doctor Who fashionista for our show, let me comment that unlike the previous iterations that we've seen of so far, I have no problem with the outfits in this episode because, one, they're not supposedly a military force.
Right.
Two, they've been trapped underground and they're all color coded more or less by like what their roles are. Simple. Mm-hmm. It's not overly complex. And
yeah, no, it's I mean, it very clearly was like, we don't have much budget. Like the fact that the helmets are absolutely the same helmets from Earthshock repainted. I mean, it's not even subtle. But again, like, in a way, this is the lack of budget is actually helping them to a degree, because it's the let's just focus on what we do at, which is good script writing and good acting. And here we're seeing a lot of it.
But do you know why they're the Earthshock helmets just repainted?
I don't actually.
It's 2 million years later. They just found them laying around. Because we don't know it yet, but this is going to be Earth. So, bada bing, right there.
Oh my God, yeah.
The L3 robot watched Earthshock and then knew about those helmets and had his people come and take them and paint them.
Oh my god, the L3 robot is in fact the audience for Doctor Who. I have so many questions now.
Because in that briefcase, I'm jumping ahead. Don't care. That briefcase at the end is full of secrets, and one of those is just Doctor Who videos on microdots.
That does bring up another interesting point is obviously this needs to be shot like a television show, and diegetically what we're watching is part of this trial. And I do like in this episode, the doctor is like, wait a minute. How do you have this? And the Viard's like, oh, by the way, we just bugged your TARDIS. And he's like, wait, go back to that. It's like, nope, moving on. More trial. I just love that. It's like they explain it and just don't fucking care. And again, pure Robert Holmes of like, here's your explanation, nerds.
But it works on another layer because that is what the Time Lords would do.
Yes.
And the Doctor is arrogant enough not to have checked.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like, you couldn't possibly bug my TARDIS. We totally did. What? When? Whenever. Reasons. Whatever. You've landed here so many times. We have absolutely had time to bug it.
It could have been any time. It could have been like the first Doctor, second, all the way up to now, and any time during all those regenerations. It is humorous, irrelevant, and poignant all at once.
And also has the extra layer of like, it opens up questions like, how long has this been going on? Has the entire run of Doctor Who actually been Matrix projections of his adventures? It could be, right? It's so good because it's like, it's the right amount of opening questions, adding to the mythology while not staying too long. That's one of the reasons why Robert Holmes also did Deadly Assassin. And it's great because he presents the Time Lord Society and gives you just enough to follow it along, but not so much that you get bogged down. And so it's interesting. And that's why later follow-ons with Gallifrey get more frustrating because they try to answer the questions that shouldn't be answered. Robert Holmes is like, no, we don't care about this. Let's focus on the good shit. And the same thing here. It's like, just, okay, apparently I have to give answers. Here's your fucking answer. Get back to the good shit.
And it also reinforces once again that the Time Lords must know what he's been doing all this time and specifically choose when they want him to do something. Like the Fourth Doctor against the Daleks. They made an active choice to interfere with you to do this thing because we know what you're doing and we're letting you do it.
Right. And then if you go with the argument of all of televised Doctor Who is ultimately a Matrix projection, then it's okay, so you've witnessed him do some shit that you should have stepped in on and you fucking didn't. But again, that tracks what we know of the Time Lords.
Because the laws of time and they don't interfere, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Allegedly.
Any other comments about any of that great plot beat before we move on? I know we're racing through, but I don't think we care about this episode as much.
No. Let's move on.
I will point out one thing, though. I love Sablon Glitz. All right. The Doctor accuses the Valeyard of wanting him dead, but the Inquisitor calms him, stating that it'll be a fair trial. Other officials arrive and break up the stoning. The Doctor is still breathing before he can be killed. Murden receives a message from the Immortal, stating that he wishes to question the Doctor. The Immortal is revealed to be a huge humanoid robot, commanding its two assistants to release the service robot. Perry is brought before the Queen, who informs her that there are few women in the tribe of the free. She needs to take on many husbands as she'll become a productive member of the tribe. She's put in prison with Glitz and Dipper. The criminals tell Perry about the light converter and inquire about the Doctor. Perry tells him that he is a Time Lord and a criminal. Perry tells him he's a Time Lord, and the criminals accuse the Time Lords of having sent him here. Perry expresses her own prudish nature about having multiple partners at one time, and the criminals talk about how they still need the locals. The trio are taken back to the Queen, who tells him that Glitz will be sacrificed to the fire because of his attempt to destroy the Great Totem. You don't know what to say. You look stunned. I, too, was stunned that Perry was so prudish about multiple husbands.
Right. I mean, polyamory in the future. Come on, let's just all get on board, get on the bus.
Regardless of the actor, John Barrowman, I think Jack's approach to life in space and time is the best approach to take.
You're right. Absolutely. No, I'm stunned because I deeply love the big stupid robot because it's oh god, I mean, like, it's a giant robot and his head is basically just two horns. He has no face. It's wonderful. It's great because and I actually love it because the design is a little off-putting. You don't have to worry about is the face going to sync up or how it's going to look or how the actor. No, it's just a guy with a giant U shoved on his head, and the only emoting he gets is turning his head side to side occasionally. But it actually kind of works because it's so simple. It you get past the shoddiness of it to what's going on. Again, that's what Doctor Who's sweet spot is. Like, okay, we can't make an elaborate robot here, so let's not. Let's make a very simple robot and focus on the script, focus on the story.
Are you kidding me? I think I had that robot as an action figure growing up. It is perfect.
Oh my god,
it looks fantastic.
It looks like it should be a Masters of the Universe character. And I think that's great. I love it.
All right, so I'm not sure how you watch your episodes, but on Amazon, because I watch them on Amazon Prime and the BBC thing there, and I was annoyed when I started part 2 because we get the startling cliffhanger from part 1 where the Doctor gets stoned and uses his umbrella, and then it's like, "Hey, wasn't that a good idea? Look what I did! Look what I did!" And then episode part 2 starts up with the Doctor saying, "Hey, look what I did! Look what I did over there with the stone." So it's giving me a minute and a half recap of the minute and a half I just saw.
Well, I mean that's the same thing. Because I'm watching episode in this case, and that's pretty common for the era, because for a long time, Doctor Who, it was we're going to replay a section of the last bit of the episode, and it shows that sometimes they pick their cliffhangers very badly. Right, because the point is like we're supposed to come back from the cliffhanger, remind us quickly from a week ago, week allegedly, what the cliffhanger was, and then that segue right into how he gets out of it, and it just kind of reinforces that this is a rubbish cliffhanger and not in a good way, not in a the Mentats knocked me down and I stood back up again way. I'm gonna get back to that one.
What I failed to mention before we started into the synopsis is that the 45-minute format was considered a failure. So that's one of the things they had to do, and they went back to the idea of the 25-minute 4-episode pieces, which we get to see here, which in my opinion works better. It does. Like the 45 minutes, it could be because I was conditioned for the 25 minutes, but 45 minutes, 50 minutes felt wrong and off for watching Doctor Who. And I still say that now, even watching the new episodes of Doctor Who, I'd rather have them be shorter episodes.
I mean, I feel like the problem happened is that they dealt with 45-minute episodes by taking 2 25-minute episodes and just sticking them together. So the episode just goes into a cliffhanger and then immediately gets out of it. So the pacing feels weird. Modern Doctor Who does better at it, but certainly there are times where the concept just Doctor Who's pacing is weird because on the one hand you have 4 25-minute episodes, sometimes 3 as we get further on, but right now we're still at roughly 4 episodes an episode. So you really have 100 minutes of story, which the new series generally takes those and tries to compress them into 45 minutes. So it feels too fast-paced at times for the concepts. But other times it's trying to shoot for a 25-minute episode story that's padded out to 45 minutes. And so sometimes it also feels baggy. So like there's very few modern Doctor Who episodes that feel like they're well-paced, but that is more consistently true as the show's gone on. But certainly the first few seasons, it's people who remember Doctor Who trying, am I taking a 25-minute episode and spanning it, or am I taking 100 minutes of episode and compressing it? And it's really, the pacing only feels good when you have those 2 or even 3-parters, because that's a more natural flow, as it were. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. It doesn't feel quite right, but some of it, I think, also is you're right. We are conditioned after 600 bloody episodes of these that oh, it's 22 and a half minutes. It's time for the Doctor to do something stupid. There we
go. Do you mean like see a cliff and use your umbrella to sort of scale down for no apparent reason to hit down a cliffhanger?
Oh, Dragonfire. Dragonfire, you're so good and so bad.
All right. The Queen.
She was great first episode. And then this happens, and it's just like, oh, we were doing so well.
I like the idea of what they're playing with, but it gets a little, I don't even have the right word for it. It gets too squishy. Like, this is where it starts getting a little squishy for me as a viewer. I
Mhm.
like the idea that she's looking to the flames to tell her the story of whatever it is, because it's leaning into the concept of mysticism. But at the same time, the queen appears to be a very tactical thinker. So they could be talking about the mysticism in flames is to like fool all the rubes that are following her everywhere she goes.
Right.
Because she's already got a plan, but now she's telling the plan through sort of a mysticism lens, which I like. But the society that they're trying to build around it now is starting, for me as a viewer, to fall apart.
Right, because, and this is, as much as we will love and have continued to heap love upon Robert Holmes, this is where cynicism kind of works against him. Because, like, of course, there's nothing under the veneer. Of course, it's just a bunch of random mystical nonsense. And it's like, no, the right answer should have been either a more logical extrapolation of the technology into what this culture is, or her more explicitly using these thin trappings as a part of political game. But at this point, it seems like she genuinely buys into the myth of her culture while also appearing to be more knowledgeable of what's going on. So it's starting to jar. These
Yeah.
two versions don't quite work together.
What I forgot to mention previously is that the people starting the Doctor, the lead of them is a character named Balthazar, who is like the great reader who's read
Oh,
their
yeah.
massive library of 3 books, one of which including like the British habitat of birds,
Right.
which could be pertinent later or could not be. Or maybe I just wanted to say it because I think it's ridiculous.
By was it HRM stationery office?
Yeah. And I personally, as a writer, like the name Balthazar. I don't know if I'm going to use it, but I'm going to pull that name and use it somewhere.
Balthazar.
Any other comments before we move on?
Nope, let's go on.
The Doctor inquires about the immortal and learns that he has been locked away for over 500 years. Only when needed do 2 of the brightest are allowed to go inside and serve him. The Doctor is taking the immortal, who introduces himself as Drathro, and has been waiting for centuries for his arrival. The Doctor clears up the confusion with Drathro that he just decided to come here. And Drathro commands the Doctor to work with his 2 assistants, who are rifling through the Doctor's pockets to fix the black light problem. Back at the trial, the Valyard comments on the Doctor's corruptive influence. Back inside of the video, the Doctor identifies a problem and tries to leave to fix it, but Drathro doesn't allow him to do that, as his instructions are to maintain an underground system. The Doctor electrifies both the robot and his 2 assistants to escape. Drathro sends his service robot to track down the Doctor. Meanwhile, Perry, Glitz, and Dibber overpower the guards and escape. Dibber remains behind to plant a bomb on the black light converter whilst they go to the underground complex.
So Robert Holmes goes, "Yo, dog, I heard you like bickering antagonists. Here's some more bickering antagonists inside of your bickering antagonists." And so we have the 2 assistants who, if it were not for Glitz and Dibber, would be the runaway characters. But unfortunately, they're competing with Glitz and Dibber, which is very hard to do. But they're still fascinated because, again, like, this is a big dumb robot who can't emote very much because of the limitations. So Robert Holmes' smart thing. Let's put 2 characters around him that can carry that load. And so you have these 2 characters who are ostensibly have no personality, but in fact have loads of it, and just argue about the dumbest shit. And if I were to place a bet, knowing what little I know about Robert Holmes, is probably also a slight dig at Doctor Who fans. Because the shit they're arguing doesn't matter, and the robot really says doesn't matter, but really they really care about these very important minor points of detail. And I'm like, that does feel a bit loaded.
But during the scene itself, it's also a time where you get to see the Doctor admit something that he doesn't know a lot about, which is
Yeah.
kind of a reoccurring theme for Colin's Doctor. And goes back and reinforces, I think, my initial assertion is that Colin's Doctor is not the brightest Doctor.
Right.
Hands down.
And also, it does something that so frustratingly few of these episodes do, which is that they showcase the fact that Colin is very funny. And so the script is just him kind of yelling at a robot and then yelling at his 2 assistants. But what's happening on the screen is the assistants pulling stuff out of his pocket and him trying to do that while having a conversation. Finally, would you just stop it? And it's hilarious, kind of physical comedy that Colin has almost never gotten to do. It's so good.
And if you're looking at what they pull out of his pockets, there's a teddy bear and some other things and a bag of sweets, which makes you wonder,
Yeah.
does he have jelly babies?
It walks right to the line of like, is that jelly babies?
So doing so much with so little is just fun to see.
And honestly, it's funny. Like it's the we talked about this way back in the day, but like it is almost a Troughton-esque performance, which continues to reinforce how much of an influence Troughton has on the character of the Doctor. Because I could see Troughton doing that exact scene.
Yeah, and given that Troughton came back to be in a Sixth Doctor episode, even more so.
I could see Troughton maybe advising him and suggesting some of the stuff to him. Absolutely.
And it's reinforcing the plot at the same time about the black light converter and how important it is. So it's letting you know that is the actual MacGuffin of everything that we're doing. It's linking all those together in just an offhanded way. It's blatant, but it's just kind of offhanded. Yeah, this is the plot. We're not really focused on that. Let's keep moving.
So, Chris, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is black light?
Black light is the energy source that Drathos uses.
What does it do?
Stuff.
How does it work?
Well, it's absorbed through the totem, that's a beacon, that goes into a computer system that then sends out waves almost like it was built by Tesla, so it's energy waves going out, that Drathos absorbs into his being and functions. Duh, come on, Eddie. This is basic.
So you're saying is Drathos is Edison.
Yeah, I am. And what I love is the fact that you got that from all of that nonsense I just told you.
That's why this is a podcast really just for us. I'm starting to
Any other comments on all this plot that we just had?
Let's move on.
In Marb Station, Merdine tells Balthazar that there has been no fire for hundreds of years and he should leave the complex. They encounter the Doctor, and Merdine implores him to help Balthazar escape. Perry, Glitz, and Dibber, pursued by locals, find the Doctor as they're leaving the tunnels, and they flee back into Marb Station, but are trapped between the hunters and the service robot. When Perry asks what they should do, the Doctor replies, "I don't know. I really think this could be the end." Doom. Credits.
Right. Which, again, is like, let's compare this to Vengeance of Varos, where the Doctor was kind of sulky and he's easily defeated, and it's like, okay, I can't do anything. This is a better version of that exact same trope, right? This is a Doctor who's sulky and sometimes depressive and sometimes gives in too easy. This is a better way of doing that. Make that into a cliffhanger. That's fantastic. Don't make him sit in the TARDIS until Perry grudgingly convinces him to actually engage with the plot. It's like, okay, no, actually make it like oh my God, I don't know how we're getting out of this. And then like next episode, oh wait, that's right, that's how I get out of this. Of course, that's how Doctor works. Doctor's gonna get out of it, but make that into a character beat of like, no, we're gonna die, I guess. And I like that. It's actually really good.
Yeah, that's too spot on. I don't have anything really to add. That was really well done. Part 3. God, we're only on part 3. The group is saved when the tribe's hunters shoot and disable the service robot. The hunter party leader is Broken Tooth, another person Merdine helped escape the tunnels. The Doctor tries to re-enter the underground complex, but the hunters insist they all return to the village. In the courtroom, the Inquisitor comments on the violence, and the Valyard states that the Doctor uses excessive violence, and you have to see these graphic scenes because that's what Doctor Who is. On Ravolox, the Doctor is brought before the Queen. She's unimpressed with his explanation of the true nature of the totem and puts them all in prison except Balthazar, while she reads the flames to determine their fate. The assistants repair the service robot, which continues its search for the Doctor. And you get to see it cruising over the land, almost like it's a prop from The Prisoner in the 60s.
Oh, God, yeah. And really, the only thing I have to say about this section is the sheer balls of Robert Holmes going, no, seriously, you need violence. I'm still pissed off at what happened in Waterhouse back in the Tom Baker era, and I'm going to grind this axe again 15 years later in this script I'm getting paid work for hire for. Fuck you. Yes, thank you. Why do we have to watch this violence? Because I said so. He's so angry.
So
That's it. That's all I got.
something that I sort of skipped over here briefly is that during parts of these, some of the Matrix scenes have been edited,
Yes. Oh yeah. That
and the Valyard, when questioned, goes, "Well, the High Council said it had to be edited,"
Mm-hmm.
and so we know there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this episode, Eddie? Really? Do we have to finish? Can't we just suddenly like stop?
I'm laughing a lot for an episode that we say we hate.
I know, I am, but it's my shtick now that we've come this far, and much like Colin, I'm going to endure to the end of it. Glitch razzes the doctor about time rings and being a Time Lord, but confirming the planet is actually Earth. Drathro's reactivated service robot enters a village. It breaks into the building with the doctor, stuns him after an attempted handshake, and then takes him away. We get another courtroom scene. Drathro believes the doctor has armed the villagers for the Time Lords. The villagers disable the service robot and decide to attack the Immortal's castle to steal his technology, believing that they have killed the Immortal. Perry rescues the doctor from the remains of the service robot, while the criminals tell her that it's too late. They shouldn't even bother with him. He's probably dead, and plot their own revenge. Colin is a very bad Tom Baker impersonation.
Yeah.
Jane.
Mm-hmm.
They set off to the underground complex to stop the Queen and disable the black light system. And Glitz and Dibber make a lot of jokes about philanthropist. Then the pair enter the tunnels seeking stuff. The courtroom scene of there's a courtroom scene. The Valyard saying the remains of scene has been exercised by the High Council. They decide it's not in the best interest of the public. The doctor could have stopped everything right here by objecting and requesting that they go and look into this missing footage, but doesn't. Back inside the Matrix video screen, the Doctor and Perry encounter Medine in the corridors of the underground complex. He tells him that he is hunting. When the Doctor asks who the quarry is, he looks at the Doctor and says, "You!" He raises his crossbow weapon at the Doctor and fires. Credits.
That's the show. The show can't cancel it now.
The
That's a dumb
Doctor killed by
cliffhanger.
crossbow. Who would have thought?
I'll once again, my favorite kind of dumb cliffhanger, because spoiler for 10 seconds from now, he's not actually firing at the doctor, he's firing at somebody else, but he still says "you," knowing that's going to be misinterpreted, because we need a cliffhanger here. It's dumb. I love it. No, the philanthropist joke is like the best part of this.
Yeah. Because
I mean, the fact that Robert Holmes is like, I know I have plot to do, but really, I just want to just really dig into these characters. He clearly is more interested in Glitz and Dibber, but not in the way we've talked about before, where Eric Sayward would write the Doctor out. Robert Holmes realizes the Doctor is part of this, so he uses the opportunity to not only establish these characters more, but also kind of pokes fun at people like the Doctor, because the Doctor is ultimately a philanthropist. And so they make jokes about philanthropy. And so it's not quite making fun of the show, but certainly, again, walking up that line, because a few times now that they've been doing this. I guess more important to me is I like the Robert Holmes' continued abject distrust of the government, where he's just like, oh no, we just censor this for the public interest. That's fine, right? No one will have a concern about that.
I think Holmes does it well. To go back to your other point, is that the Doctor is the protagonist of this episode, hands down. Mm-hmm. Doctor and Perry are protagonists, and they're going through the plot beats. They're doing all the hard lifting and work. Glitz and Dibber, who are his primary characters, are the comic relief, and they're tangentially related to the plot. They'll be very important in the finale of the plot, and they had importance at the beginning of the plot, but during the middle, they are where all the fun is. Like, right. Hands down. And that's how it should work throughout the entire time. Right. It doesn't remove agency from our protagonist, but it adds in flavor.
Yeah. On the other hand, I before praised the little continuity nods. Now we're starting to get a little too many of them. Because not only do we have the Doctor coming back and mistaking Perry for Sarah Jane, like you said, doing a bad Tom Baker impression, but also a throwaway joke about time rings. And it's like now the show is starting to. It moved from thank you for recognizing my fandom and making clever notes to it to kind of the yeah, but wasn't Tom Baker better? Is kind of where it's starting to land a bit more now, and he's not wrong, but this is supposed to be about reinventing Colin and continuing having Colin point back to previous eras of Doctor Who that were popular is getting a bit uncomfortable at this stage.
So I think this is a meta thing, though, because if I remember right, Colin Baker at the time says that he wanted to have a longer run than Tom Baker did.
Okay.
In addition, you've got Holmes, who, even when he wrote for Davison, says he was writing a script for Tom.
Yeah.
So Holmes's era, regardless of how much we give him praise, is the Tom Baker era. So everything he's doing is probably going to reference what he himself is more associated with and loves.
Right. And I will say to Colin's credit, I mean, obviously the amnesia a little bit aside, he's doing a really good job of taking what, like you said, is pretty clearly Tom Baker style dialogue and putting his own stamp on it. This is, like you said earlier, a glimpse at a really fun version of the Sixth Doctor that we didn't get before, when we're not going to get a ton of after this. And much like with Caves of Androzani, it's like a good actor taking somebody else's lines and putting his own stamp on them could actually do a lot better than lines that are essentially written for them that are kind of lukewarm and mediocre. The challenge of how do I take this and put my own spin on it? Again, doing that kind of Troughton-esque runaround. Yes, it's a nod to different Doctor, but blending Tom Baker's bombast with Troughton's physical comedy does result in a distinctive third option that is the Sixth Doctor. And so this point where it's more about continuity nods and less about taking Tom Bakerish lines and turning them to Colin Bakerish lines gets a little, for me, a little kind of like, I get it. It's frustrating, but I think you're right. Like, this is Colin's doing way better in this script, paradoxically, again, because it's not written for him.
And something that we've sort of hinted at, but I'll state now, is that throughout the course of this, you have people constantly talking about Time Lords and time rings, which are nods
Yeah,
back, but at the same time, that wouldn't be common knowledge.
right,
So how does Glitz, a con man and like pirate, know about Time Lords and time rings? So it's
right.
layering in plot right there. It's funny throwaway nods and everything else that you're not necessarily paying attention to.
True. And the nice thing about this is that also the fans are so inured with Time Lord references that they're probably not even catching initially that this is supposed to be a weird thing. And the Time Lords themselves are arrogant enough that they're not interested, but the Doctor in the Trials saga is starting to kind of go, wait a minute, why do they know that? Why is this stuff being excised? And when, like you said, the stuff is excised here, it's implied that Time Lord secrets are being revealed on some level, but it's Glitz and Dibber revealing that information. It's like, why are these two, like you said, why are these two con men possessing a secret that's so terrifying that the High Council has censored it?
Yeah.
So it is a good balance of let's take comedy and humor and also layer in a really dark, horrible metaphors about overreaching government censorship, which again is peak Robert Holmes.
Any final comments on that before we move on to part 4?
Nope, let's go to the last episode.
The Queen and her tribe arrive at the castle, where they are confronted by Drathro. He executes the Queen and dismisses the rest of them. In the courtroom, the Doctor confronts the charges head on, calling them a farce, engaging in a heated argument with the Valyard. Glitz and Dibber are edited again by the Valyard, hiding vital information, and angers both the Inquisitor and the Doctor. The Valyard plays a slightly less edited version, and the two know of something tapping to the greatest source of information in the galaxy.
Which is the Matrix.
We don't know that. They don't say the Matrix.
It's implied to be the Matrix at this point.
The Inquisitor doesn't think that. The Doctor doesn't think that yet.
And this is What makes this season both intriguing and frustrating is that it implies, oh, there's this massive Time Lord conspiracy going on, and where will that go? But arguably, conspiracy theory TV shows aren't even done well now. But this is before the X Files, right? So no one knows how to do
Yeah.
a conspiracy TV show well yet. And so it's strong to make that kind of the spine of your framing story for this season is like the Doctor, in the midst of his own trial, is going to uncover a Time Lord conspiracy. The problem is, or for the audience to get that, everybody else in this trial has to act like a complete idiot.
Yeah. I just wanted to stop and point that out before we move on. Any other comments?
I kind of want a version of this show where it's the child Time Lord but done as Ace Attorney. But other than that, no. Objection!
Perry convinces Merdine not to kill all the innocent people he was ordered to by Drathro. The Doctor enters Drathro's domain, promising to help repair the Black Light system. However, he determines it's beyond repair and tells Dratho that he must shut down the Black Light system to prevent a massive explosion. Dratho refuses, as it would mean his own destruction. The Doctor pleads with him, saying that the explosion could destroy the entire universe. That makes Dratho determined to allow what he thinks is a unique event. Balthazar and Perry plead with Merdine to help them, noting that he would die if the converter exploded. Glitz and Dibber arrive and follow them into the castle through a food chute. Dratho tries to kill them by turning on the food processing system, but Dibber shoots him through the wall. Glitz tells Dratho that they have black light on their ship and offers to take the robot to the Andromeda Galaxy. Dratho agrees, gathers all of its microdot secrets into a briefcase, and leaves with Glitz and Dibber. I'm looking at Eddy
I
for comments.
I honestly don't have much. I mean,
All right.
stuff happens.
The Doctor realizes that the black light system is already beginning to self-destruct. All he can do to prevent it is start a chain reaction. The system explodes, but the blast only destroys the castle, and as a result, Dratho collapses. Glitz and Dibber collect a piece of black light metal worth a small fortune that'll fund their next venture. The Doctor and Perry leave Merdine and Balthazar to take the remaining inhabitants to form a new life on the surface. The Doctor is determined to uncover what secrets the criminals wanted and who moved Earth/Ravalox to its new location. The Doctor announces to the court that he has saved the universe and starts to present his offense. The Inquisitor says, "In due time, Doctor." The Doctor comments about the withheld evidence and that his presence was requested. The Valyard counters every point the Doctor makes, almost as if he knows what he'll say. The Valyard warns the Doctor that he has more evidence to come and that the court will determine the Doctor's life at the end. Roll credits. And weird look from Colin.
Right. So, I mean, recognizing that television court drama obviously has no parallel to real world's legal systems and how they work. And I made the Ace Attorney joke because Ace Attorney also is in no way, shape, or form anything remotely resembling an actual effective legal system. But all of that said, the Doctor has some really valid points. Like, he's ambushed by this evidence, has had no chance to actually mount a meaningful defense, is told repeatedly by both the Inquisitor and the Valyard that he'll be allowed to defend himself in time, but that time has not yet come in 4 episodes. Every time he tends to raise an actual objection, he is told off by either the prosecutor or the judge, effectively. And when he goes, okay, well, I've been quiet, you present the evidence, now it's my turn. It's like, no, wait, I have even more evidence. It's like, okay, but seriously, I have had no chance to review any of this to mount any kind of defense. I'm just being bombarded with stuff. And on top of that, the evidence has been censored, and I have been told that the judge is allowed to see it, but I am not. This should have been thrown out of court.
You make a bunch of good points, and I'm in agreement. But, in its defense, I'm going to say that it has a better understanding of the court system than She-Hulk does. Boom! I pulled out a Marvel gag, and it is true.
Okay, fair. That's a very low bar to clear, but you're right.
And
It's just,
I agree. It's the fact that they needed it for more drama and suspense they're building up. And admittedly, they state early on he has like two distinctive cases he wants to give you. But the fact that the Doctor hasn't been able to see it and it's all edited would definitely mean that it would not fly.
Right.
But who knows in Space Court?
Well, and that's what's I joke about it, but actually I think it's working well here, is that this is an extremely thin framing device. And so the only way this works is if this is a kangaroo court. And so the show, and of course, being Robert Holmes, he's like, of course it is. He's not even trying to hide it. Of course, this is just a stitch up by the government to try to get a political dissident off the books in a ostensibly legal fashion. So it's like, that's not at all a metaphor for any government we're talking about in the 80s. So the fact that works really well, because the shows are trying to hide that. It's weird that the Inquisitor doesn't quite know that's what's actually going on. So that leads to an interesting level. Okay, so maybe there's more layers happening here. The High Council seems to be interfering with this, and the Inquisitors apparently have a separate jurisdiction, which again alluded at the front, because the fact that he's not on Gallifrey, he's on a space station, which kind of has the international waters vibe about it.
But it also gives you the bureaucracy that's associated with Gallifrey, and sometimes they're just people who are jobbers, and the Inquisitor is a jobber, and she believes in the system that she's supposedly supporting and is doing the work.
Yeah.
So, which makes you think the Doctor would get potentially a fair trial from her.
Right.
It's all the other factors around her that are influencing what happens.
Right. So, as a start for this season, you're right. It's incredibly strong. It gives you a window into a season that could have been. It gives you a window into a version of the Sixth Doctor that could have been. But not everyone can be Robert Holmes. And so this is going to continue to go downhill.
And at the start of it, it had, I think, great viewing figures. And those viewing figures held strong throughout the season, I think, for the first half. And then they dipped, and then they potentially skyrocketed back up for the finale, if memory serves.
Right, because I say we're going to skip over Bonnie Langford. Mel, she was, as I understand, stunt casting, right? She was a person that people would have recognized at the time, as they hired her as a well-known actress to play into Doctor Who, and they managed the incredible feat of mismanaging her character even more than Perry. So she's got that going for her.
She was a child star, and then she did a bunch of musicals and other thing, and she's even still doing musicals today. And she's coming back to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because supposedly she was the character Mel is a computer programmer, and throughout the entire course of the show, she never once came near a computer.
Nope. And of course, due to the weirdness of the trial of Time Lord, we actually don't even know what her origin story is, because we meet her in media res, which is, again, interesting concept of just having a companion show up, but it never goes anywhere, sadly.
Isn't there an audio Big Finish adventure that shows her? It's called like the two doctors or something, where she meets him out of time, out of sync.
Yes, it's it's not the Two Doctors, it's something else. But you're right, because it's two versions of the Sixth Doctor.
Yeah.
So we have the version of the Sixth Doctor that meets Mel, but also a later version of the Doctor has to come back and make sure that works out the way it's supposed to. And so she actually meets the later Sixth Doctor first, and then the earlier Sixth Doctor meets her later before it takes her off on her adventures. And it's honestly, it's a bit of a farce, and that's how you need to play that, and that works out well on that front. At one point in time, no, I'm thinking of a Perry story. So there's a Perry story where she also meets two versions of the Doctor, and at one point, he dresses up in a rubber suit, but which is a hilarious gag. The Doctor literally wears a rubber monster suit, and terrorizes Perry, and it's like, that's just fantastic.
So anyway, any closing thoughts on the television run of the Sixth Doctor?
We did it. It's a deeply frustrating era of television. Because it would be easier if I hated Colin Baker. It'd be easier if it was just top to bottom garbage. It's not. As much as we make fun of this episode, as much as we make fun of Vengeance on Varos, there are bits and pieces of it that show that the Doctor Who we love is still somewhere under this cruft. And again, we harp on about it, but Big Finish has done so much to redeem Colin Baker's reputation as the Sixth Doctor and the Sixth Doctor as a character, to show that going back and knowing that and going back to watch the show is even more frustrating because it's like you could almost see bits and pieces of that in there, but it's just buried under so much Eric Saywardness that it kind of just gets. I mean, it's more than that, but it's easy to point Eric and go, he's the fault. It's not only his fault, but he's kind of the patient zero of everything that's wrong with the show at this point.
And a lot of my thoughts are similar to yours, that it would be easier to just hate it and write it off if Colin Baker wasn't such a wonderful human being from everything that we've seen, read, and him interacting with the universe. And the fact that even with all of this shit that was piled on top of him as a person, at no point in time did he ever belittle or berate the show. He supported the show from even then to now, if not the people behind it. So like that shows someone that cared about the thing they did, cared about the fans that were out there, and continued to work and came back when the regime changed.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Baker in a nutshell. Fandom was largely against him, and very, very roundly turned on him. And still, I mean, just now we're still talking shit about his episodes. He still went to conventions. He still did interviews. For a long time, he still supported the show, even when nothing about the show was supporting him. And I think it speaks a lot to his character as an actor. Nicola Bryant, again, she got garbage scripts. She got terrible characterization. She still supported the show and still supports the show. And their faith in the show has borne out. The show has grown to appreciate them. The fact that both of them got to do a Tales of the TARDIS thing, I was surprised to see they got a Sixth Doctor episode. I figured that was one they would skip. They didn't, and they did the best with what they could, given the shit sham which they had to work with. But at the end of the day, as frustrating and as terrible as the relationship between Sixth Doctor and Perry started at, it showed that there was something there. Those two actors have a genuine affection for each other, and it's just so. That's why it's so annoying to watch this episode, and why this is not a I hate this and it's bad and I want to talk about it because it's boring. It's I hate this and bad and I want to talk about it because I just get mad because I want the show that I can see in my head.
And while you say that, we have never said anything bad about Colin Baker, the actor. We've gone out of our way to point out that it was the scripts he was given and the environment that he had to work in for him and Nicola and I forgot her name now, but Bonnie Langford. Because Bonnie Langford has dealt with a bunch of shit too after that too.
Yeah.
And atrocious. So all of them had it rough. And they all came back in some form or another.
Yeah, but Bonnie, I think, was the one who took actually a time with Doctor Who for a while. But she was. So we're going to kind of skip over the Mel era real quick. But basically, she started off kind of, again, in media res in Colin Baker's run, which is not well liked. And then she is pointed to as the reason why the Seventh Doctor's weaker shows are the way they are, neither of which are true, and none of them which are her fault. But she kind of got the short stick of both eras in that regard. So I was genuinely surprised and pleased when she came back to Doctor Who recently, to the point where my family members were like, who the hell is this? And I had to explain Mel to them because she's not well known. But it shows that every era of Doctor Who has its people who love it and are affectionate about it. And as time goes on, you can look back and see the good bits of it. But man, it's hard to do at this point.
Do you have a closing quote for us to wrap up the Sixth Doctor?
I do. It is not from the television series. We talked a lot about Big Finish. I want to kind of show some of the greatness that came from the Sixth Doctor era of Big Finish. This is from the Marian Conspiracy. What would you say if I were to tell you that I once destroyed an entire race, that I have led friends to their deaths and caused numerous wars, that my intervention has led to peaceful races taking up arms and good people having their faith or reason destroyed? Or, because I failed to act, millions upon millions of people have been enslaved or killed? What if I had done all of these things, but I'd always believed that I was doing the right thing? And
Good
that is
quote.
the
Good
Sixth
quote.
Doctor I love.
Well, what can people expect next time when we come back to do more Doctor Who?
The rest of the Trial of Time Lord. We're going through every single season, every single episode.
Yes.
Yes. Even going to do. Oh, no, we're not. We're actually going to skip not only the rest of this season, but the next two. We're going all the way to season 26 of the Seventh Doctor era, arguably the best season of classic Doctor Who ever. And we're going to watch the first 4 episodes of that season, Battlefield, where the Seventh Doctor, no shit, fights King Arthur.
If people are looking to support you, where can they go and do that?
They can go to my website, pugsteady.com. They can, if they want to give me money directly, the best way to do that is through my creator-owned stuff at realmsofpugmire.com, or you can back my Patreon, where I am doing Realms of Pugmire fiction about once a month. So if you want some short stories by me and want to give me some cash, that is a great way to do that. How about you?
If you're looking to support me, you can come to my website, darkwhostudios.com, and buy some of my less than 100 copies of Haunted West. You can join the Patreon and get great exclusive John West episodes where I also then post historical information and random game stuff.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to leave you with the oft mentions, never repeated, thank God, Doctor in Distress.